You're listening to the A Bit From Within podcast with Felicia Marty. I used to think that I needed to share everything I was going through, even when my feelings and my growth were dependent on it. And I absolutely do not feel that way anymore. We get to actually decide, we get to have power over that. And we don't have to get anybody else's opinions or their approval on what we're experiencing. Hi there, everybody, and thank you so much for joining me today for a new episode of the A Bit From Within podcast. I'm Felicia, for those of you who don't know me, and the A Bit From Within platform is a place where we really strive to practice self-love in very tangible ways. And I think one of the best ways we can do that is by meeting ourselves exactly where we're at today, without the expectations of, fitting into the jeans we used to wear 10 years ago, or looking in the mirror and seeing the same person that we used to be, or that sometimes it's even letting go of who we think we should be or who we wished we were, right? Because it doesn't really matter in this moment. What matters is what's happening today, and can we not only find practices that make us feel like we're taking care of ourselves, but can we actually start to feel that genuine self-love and real care and appreciation and worthiness, and can it come from deep inside? This is a hard stuff to do, which is why I so believe in sharing a bit of what I've been going through. I promise that it's not all beauty and worthiness and abundance and enoughness every single day, although we strive for that, right? We try to celebrate those moments when we have them. But often I'm here kind of sharing the stuff I'm bumping up into and the stuff that I'm struggling with, because I want you to always know that you're not alone. One of the reasons I started A Bit From Within is because I know what it's like when you hear somebody share just that one piece, that one sentence that they said that just resonates with you, and it gives you that courage to keep going, or it gives you that momentum just to try again. And that's what I really want to share back with the world. So that's what I'm doing here today. And this morning I am sitting here with my first hot coffee since, summertime. It is like 27 degrees outside here in Denver. Finally starting to feel a little bit more like winter is coming, and the cold is moving in. I feel like all weekend it was super beautiful. And then yesterday, Dave and I actually did a little bit of a date day. We decided to go venture to IKEA, which we've only done together one other time, and it did not go well. So I was a little nervous to try yesterday, but we actually had the most fabulous time. It was really not too busy. I was expecting a lot worse, and we found some great things for the house and got lots of ideas, things we did not buy, but, dreamed about. And when we were headed back, you could feel the temperature changing. And by the time we got out of the car, it was like a 45-minute drive. The wind was blowing so hard, and you could feel the cold front coming in. And it just reminded me as nothing stays forever. Even when you're having this really long spell of this beautiful weather, things do change. So this morning when I woke up, I thought I'm gonna go for a hot coffee today, instead of my normal iced coffee, and just kind of enjoy this change of pace a little bit. And that's something I'm really trying to put into my energy field right now, is just a different change of pace. As I've been sharing with a lot of you who've been listening for a while, I had a very busy summer, and my main full-time job is a wedding photographer. And after coming out of this season, it's shooken me up a little bit. And I feel like I kind of had a delayed reaction, because at the very end of the season in October, I was connecting with vendors. We started talking about 2022, and it was just it felt like there was no space to breathe. It was just going through the motions. And then November hit, and it's I feel like I kind of got slapped in the face a little bit with the reality of how I've been feeling after this crazy year. And not just not just the crazy year, right? Like, it's not the weddings that I experienced. It's not any one thing that has kind of made me feel how I'm feeling right now. It's more like I've been continuing to walk through this gateway, and now I'm looking back and realizing that where I'm at right now is nowhere close to where I was when I started. And there's lots of good things about that, right? But there's also this part of me that's realizing like I'm not the same person, and the things that I'm wanting in my life aren't the same as I wanted 4 years ago when I went full time with my business, the wedding photography business. And so now that I'm kind of like sitting with this, like, oh my gosh, like I'm different now. I've walked through this gateway the past, especially 2 years with 2020, the pandemic, into this year, this season, still living in through all of this stuff up. That's how I'm going to describe it. Just like there's lots of intensity. And I'm just starting to sit with the fact that I'm like, okay, I want things to be different. I really want things to slow down. And so I'm going to be taking some time off coming up next week. When I record this, I'm going to be officially like on a real like break from the business I've worked so hard to create. And I'm really looking forward to that. And I'm looking at it as kind of like this place of healing. But what I want to share is that I know that I'm in a really like privileged place where I can afford to take 4 weeks away, where I can set those limitations with my business. I can say, hey, we're not taking on any new weddings at this point. We're not taking on any jobs at this point. Like, we are in this protected space. And I feel really lucky to be able to do that. And I know that for some of you out there, like, you don't have that ability necessarily to take a vacation from work, or at least not for 4 weeks, right? Like, trust me, this is not a normal thing that I do. This is a very big deal for me. But I will say that all of us can do these things and make time for our healing in different ways. And one of the things that I've been doing to prepare myself for the kind of space that I want to be able to take up next week, and I don't feel quite ready yet, but I've been really trying to already put myself in this mentality. I've been really starting to practice no. I've been really trying to practice setting limitations, and I've been really trying to do so in a very quick and efficient way, because there's a part of me, and I intend to talk about this a little bit more later in this episode, but there's a part of me that really struggles with saying no because I don't like to let people down. And so I'll spend a lot of time and energy kind of figuring out the best way to write the email that says no, or explain myself, or pump myself up, or really fight with myself. Am I sure I'm going to say no? Like, I don't want to, it's like we go through this thing back and forth. And I waste so much energy and time doing that. And so I know that even though I'm going to be on this vacation and on this break, that, my personal phone is attached to my business phone. So I know I'm going to get calls coming in. I can't, like hire a screener to be like, are you intending to call Felicia Marty Photography? Because if you are, then you're gonna have to email. I do have a little thing in my voicemail that kind of says that. And I was thinking this morning, I'm like, maybe I should put out there in my voicemail that I'm on this break. And then I thought, no, like, I just have to know, like, inquiries are going to keep coming in. People are still going to be wanting things of me. I can't change that during a break. Right? And I think this is true for all of us. It's like we kind of feel like we're going to set this break or this boundary, whatever this is. Maybe you go on a vacation for a couple days, or maybe it's the weekend space that you're protected, or maybe it's just an evening that you want to carve out for yourself. And inevitably, somebody's going to call you and want something from you, whether it's like, for me, it could be a client. For some of you, it could be a parent calling needing something, or your spouse, or a friend, or whoever. And you can almost feel like it drains you, because what you want is this clear cut, like, boundary that's like, don't even come and approach me. This is how protective I am of this space. And trust me, I know how that feels. But is it realistic? No, it's not realistic to let everybody know in your life, like, don't come at me. What you have to do is hold that space for yourself and understand that we as individuals are in charge of what we let through and what we let affect us. So it's okay if the phone rings and we don't answer it. It's okay if somebody asks us for something and we say no. Right? Like these are okay things where we say not no never, but not right now. Right? Like, I'd love to help you. I can't get to that yet. And that's something that I've struggled with so much in my life, is giving my energy and my time and my resources away to other people immediately. Even if I don't want to, I sometimes do it resentfully. And I've just really, as I prepare for this space, been really trying to get used to the fact and like get my head wrapped around, how do I hold space for myself? How do I carve out that protection for myself? For it doesn't matter what anybody else does. It doesn't matter how close somebody gets to me or what they want from me or what they approach me with or if I was ready for that or not. It doesn't matter, because I am standing so strong in myself right now. And I know I am very clear about what I have energy for, how I'm moving through life. At least I'm trying to the best I can. And just holding that space. So that's been my practice lately, and just also kind of starting to imagine myself going through this and starting to think of some of the fun things that I want to do and how I want to create and things like that. Like, I keep going back and forth quite a bit on like how much time I need away from work. Because there's this part of me that's like, I just want to be in full vacation mode, like doing no work at all, just cooking and doing yoga and visiting friends and watching movies, and that's it. And then there's this other part of me that actually knows myself, and I'm like, I like having things to do, and I like doing things that bring me joy. So there's another part of me that's like, I'm going to completely revamp my closet. I'm going to, what else was I thinking? Oh, like with the Bit From Within, like I have all of the lunar guides and the end of year stuff. And there's these projects that I haven't even been able to have energy for, that I've been dreaming about with A Bit From Within for the website, like special series and things like that I'm like, okay, now I need to do this and this and this. And I'm there, the jury's out on that right now. I've left it to this idea of like, if something comes up organically that brings me joy and fills me with energy and that I'm excited for, then I'm going to put my time into it. And if anything starts to feel draining or like I'm forcing it or that I'm getting frustrated with the process, then I'm straight up just going to keep waiting on it, because I'm going to walk away in that moment, because that's what I want to try to avoid, is doing things from a place of being kind of churning through stuff. Because I've experienced a lot of that this year, and it's been really tough, and that is what I'm trying to give myself a break from. And this weekend was a really good test of that, because I have a couple of projects that I'm wrapping up, and I guess, honestly, luckily for me, Dave has been very preoccupied this weekend. He has some stuff that he's just consumed with, and so I've had a lot of time to myself just to kind of wander through space. And I didn't have any sessions this weekend. So I had a couple meetings. I had to do some stuff for the business. And of course, I'm trying to get stuff ready to go for the next couple weeks. But yesterday afternoon, after we got back from IKEA, I started doing some work, and I was just like feeling one of those yuck moments where I'm like, ugh, I just can't work on this right now. I was trying to walk on my treadmill. I was trying to listen to this book. I was like doing all of these things. And then I just felt myself being pulled towards working on next year's moon tracker. So if this is like, what are you talking about, Felicia? Oftentimes on the podcast, I have a little segment that, well, we're getting close to, I'll kind of weave it into this, called our Astro segment, where I'm just calling a little bit of attention to either where the moon is at in its lunar cycle, or what sign it's in, where the sun is at in the zodiac, like just astrological information, because I have found it so useful to use astrology as a tool in my life. And I like sharing it back with each of you. And if you find it interesting, wonderful. And it's a big part of the Patreon because with my Patreon, where you can listen to this ad free, or we could do yoga and meditation, there's a lot of, the main point is for me to help hold space for you to practice self-care, whether that's through yoga or meditation or taking time to reflect or do personal rituals, just trying to throw out new, different ideas to you and inspire you. And each month I have, for the past almost 2 years, I've been putting out a full moon guide and a new moon guide. And so in 2021, like getting into it, I had created this lunar tracker so that you could print it out and throughout the year actually like keep track. Okay, this is what I set intentions for during this new moon. This is what kind of peaked or what I realized and what I let go of during this full moon. And you could write other things in it too, like things that were going on. So that way, when we come around 6 months later, we can look back at where the moon was at in that opposite polarity. We can kind of start to see patterns, things that we would not have normally connected if we were just trying to think back ourselves. When we actually look back, we can see a lot more themes. It's really, really powerful. So last year was my first year of creating this, and I was pretty happy with how it came out. But this year, I'm putting a new twist on it, and that's what I ended up working on yesterday. Is like I just went in with the idea to just kind of create the framework, and then I started creating a couple new sections of this, and I'm really excited about it. So I'll be sure to let you know when it's actually available, when it's done and ready. There is a chance that I might put out like feelers for those of you who want me to have them actually printed and mail it to you. That's something I've been kind of playing with, possibly doing. But that really means I have to get my stuff together. But it's going to be so worth it. And you can, of course, have it digitally as well. I'm going to put it up on my website so that you can check it out there. But I'm telling you, there is something really magical that happens when you slow down enough to tune into yourself, because that's what this really is, right? Like, yes, we're using this idea of the lunar cycles to find these patterns. Yes, I think there is something very magical about using that cycle. And I also think there's something to be said about adding those layers of the different elements of the signs of the zodiac and kind of understanding the polarity, and like, but you can take that as deep as you want to. You could also keep it as light as you want to. Like if you're just using it as every 28 days, I go to the next, page and I'm kind of keeping track of things. There will be magic that happens in your life, because the more self-aware we are and the more tuned in we are, then we become so powerful to take control over where we're at and how we're moving through life. And what that really comes down to is what our attitude is, how we're approaching it. I don't know. I really, really promote some kind of journaling or knowing how you're moving through life and being able to look back at it, because I think that's where the major transformation can happen, is the more that you can really sit and look back and reflect on what was happening. You can see things that you can't see when you don't do it. So anyway, that being said, we can transition a little bit into our astro segment. This weekend, just a couple days ago, we had this total solar eclipse during this new moon in Sagittarius. A lot of Sagittarius energy as the sun and the moon were together. And this was an extra powerful new moon because it was paired with that eclipse. They say that when an eclipse happens, it's kind of like a new moon or a full moon on steroids. It kind of makes the energy even more amplified. And so I mentioned this in this month's new moon guide, which if you want to kind of check it out in retrospect, you can download it for free from our website, just in the monthly new moon guide. But I was sharing about with eclipses, how you kind of, especially with a solar eclipse, because that happens during the new moon, we kind of want to be careful about what we're manifesting. Because normally during a new moon phase, there is this idea of like, we're setting intentions, we're starting a new cycle, we're kind of putting new energy out there, and we're going to let ourselves grow into it. But it's kind of like whatever we decide during an eclipse, or whatever happens, even if we don't decide it, it can have some pretty long lasting and permanent effects on it. And so for many of us, you'll know when you're in those big life changes and, that things are swinging kind of big for you. And for others of us, it's kind of our job right now just to really sit with our dreams and sit with the signs that we're being given from the universe. In fact, that was kind of my message and encouragement with this new moon cycle, was a ritual around listening. Like, how do you tune in to the conversation that you're having with the divine? Whether you're very religious and you feel like that's a conversation you're having with God, or whether that's something that's a little bit more open, like a conversation with the universe. I really believe that we're constantly being held by the divine and our connection to it. We're constantly being giving signs. We're constantly being led. But sometimes we are going too fast that we can't see it, or we're not tuned into it. And so this is a really beautiful time, especially as we kind of move closer to the full moon, which will be right before Christmas. In fact, I think it's on December 24th. I'll have to double check. But this is a time to tune in and listen. So be as present as you can. Let yourself just slow down. It's a beautiful time to journal, right? In fact, there's a prompt I have inside that new moon guide. So if you haven't checked it out yet, take a moment, go grab it or download it. If you're a Patreon member, you had it delivered right to your inbox. You can go back to the post for the new moon and just take a peek at it. I think there's lots of great info in there, and something to help. The other thing that guide includes, which I think is really great, especially to do during this new moon, is there is a 3-page reflection on this past year, and kind of will walk you through reflecting on this year. And I think even though it's not the end of December and we're going right into 2022, there's nothing, it's kind of like I was saying how I'm preparing for my vacation coming up. It's kind of like that. Like we're 3-ish weeks out from the rest of this month before a new year. This is the perfect time to start doing that reflection, so that you're not trying to cram it into 2 days before 2021 turns into 2022 and you feel like new year, new me, right? Like we need to give ourselves more time than that to sit with it, to ponder, to have that conversation with the universe, to say, this is what I've been working on. These are my themes. These are the things I'm noticing. Where do I go from here? Right? That's my thought. That's my take on it all this year. So that's kind of a little bit of our astro segment. And I will say that right now the sun is in Sagittarius, and there is something about that Sagittarius quality that is asking us to find truth and meaning, and is on this quest for faith. So it's a perfect time for it. All right, let's take a quick break and we'll get into the heart of today's episode. So my week last week felt like a big one. I'm, like I mentioned earlier, I'm kind of in this gateway. I'm kind of realizing these changes that I want to make. And a lot of pieces were just starting to come together, a lot of revelations I was having last week. And during this time, I was kind of reflecting on the way that I have changed, because we're all changing all the time. And I love this kind of moment where we really put together the ways in which we are different, or we think differently than we used to think. And so I came up with these 3 different ways that I have changed, and put it kind of into this formula of like, I used to think blank, but now I realize blank. So if this resonates with you, maybe you can come up with a couple of your own. You could always shoot me the message. I'd love to hear what your revelations are, or if any of these resonate with you. So the first one is, I used to think that everyone needed to be in the know about everything I was going through, like what I was processing, how I was feeling, what my plans were. And now I realize that this is not true, that it is okay to evolve privately, while gently setting the next steps and moving into those next steps. So I'll give a little bit more context to that. I think that this happened especially because in my 20s, social media is big now. But when I was in my 20s, social media had barely begun and then started to become a lot bigger. And in my 20s, I was, starting my business, and everyone had all these ideas about how to put yourself out there. And I just felt a lot of pressure. Specifically, I mean, as a person, sure, but as a business owner, when I started doing photography, I felt like every single thing I did had to be online. Like if I did a newborn shoot, it had to be online. When I took on my first wedding, it had to be online. When I when it would come this time of year, like end of year, I felt like I had to do a big blog post saying everything I loved about the year and everything I learned. And I literally felt like I had to just constantly put everything out there all the time. And I remember, it must have been maybe, I don't even remember what year it was, to be honest with you. But there was a fall when I was so busy that I couldn't take on any other like fall clients. And I think it was when I was also really trying to groove more towards the wedding niche. And so there was a period of like 4 months where like I just had to say no to all family sessions. Like everybody who inquired, I just had to, it was really painful, but I had to say like, hey, I can't help you this year. And I felt so much pressure to be so public about this. Like I felt like I had to make a big blog post about it and put it out on social media and like have these posts about it. And I made this big thing about it. And then before you knew it, like a couple, months later, like I had fixed what I was going through and I was back in the groove and I was doing all this stuff. And I remember thinking like, I really didn't need to go through all of that so publicly. Like I could have just experienced what I went through, set the limits that I needed to, but I didn't need to make it this big promotional thing of like, hey, like it was sounding the alarm on myself, or I was just trying to assert my needs out there to everybody else. And that was a big learning lesson. And there's this other thing that has kind of impacted the way that I've processed this as well. And it's this quote from Brene Brown that has just always stuck with me. I mean, what doesn't stick with you when it's coming from Brene Brown? She's so amazing. But she says, I don't share anything until my feelings and my growth aren't still dependent on it. I should say it again just to let it like really soak in. So I don't share anything until my feelings and my growth aren't still dependent on it. And as soon as I heard that and I really processed it and it like sank in, I realized that is what I had been doing. I used to think that I needed to share everything I was going through, even when my feelings and my growth were dependent on it. And I absolutely do not feel that way anymore. That's probably a better way of phrasing what I said at the beginning of this thing is I think it's okay to evolve privately. I think it's okay to work through what you're going through, whether you are transitioning your business. You don't have to do that publicly. Like you can announce it once you've figured out the details. And you don't even have to have like a hard rollout. You could do it softly. You could do it gently, right? That is something you get to decide to do. I mean, you get to decide that as a person. You do not have to share everything that you're going through. And I'm not saying that you should never share anything you're experiencing. I actually do think that's one of the most beautiful parts of social media is that There's so many people out there being vulnerable, sharing their experiences. They're sharing their journey. They're sharing the things that they're bumping up into. I mean, here I am using this podcast platform to share some of the things that I'm bumping up into and that I'm kind of battling in my life. But I think the difference is that we get to actually decide, like we get to have power over that. And we don't have to get anybody else's opinions or their approval on what we're experiencing. So if you want to put something out there and you don't care what people say, like you're in a much more protected place than if you are going through something that is so vulnerable that other people's opinions are going to influence you. They're going to change how you're experiencing it. Those are the moments that I caution you not to. Because I felt that, like when I had that experience where I was being very public about like how hard things had been about the business that year, and I needed a break and I had to say no to all these clients, and I was just being so public about it, and how public about how hard it was. I actually did have a client that used that against me. And it was a really hard situation. And I remember having so much regret about how that was manipulated against me. And it would have been different if I wasn't still going through it, right? It would have been different if later, months later, I had said, yeah, last year was really hard for me, and this is what I did about it. Instead of this is what I'm going through, and having people look at me differently. So that's one way that I really feel like I've changed. And I feel like here I am in another gateway, and I've shared pieces of how, things have been affecting me lately, but I also feel like some of the stuff that I'm thinking about with my business, like I'm not showing all my cards, and that's okay. That's my right? Like that is my right to sit with this and really figure out what I want and how I want and the timeline and everything. And that feels really powerful, that I'm not giving all of that away, that I'm not sharing the pieces where I'm feeling a bit lost, because I could really see myself getting bumped around if I did that. The second piece is I used to think that I had to say yes. And now I realize that I get to say no. This one's a big one for me because it's like that people pleaser thing. Like I really felt like I had to say yes to everyone. And if I said no to anyone, I felt like I wasn't good enough, right? Isn't that interesting how when people want things from us, if we can't help them, we can feel terrible. And I think that's because so many of us are innately good people who we have a desire to be of service to others. I think that is part of our humanity. In fact, Dave and I just had this experience recently where we were on our way to run an errand, and we realized that we just had one mask in the car. And so we were going through Starbucks drive-through, and he was like, let's just ask if they have a mask. And I'm like, oh my God, no, that is so weird. No, we're not going to do that. And so of course we're at the drive-through, and he like leans over and he's like, hey, weird question. Like, it's totally okay if you don't have it, but like, do you have a disposable mask? And she, like, her eyes lit up and she's like, yeah, we actually do. I can get one from up front. And she brought it to us, and she was so nice, and our whole problem was solved, and like we were good, and we were so thankful to her, and like it was this great moment. And we left, and he was saying, he's like, that another author that he had read recently, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of them, but was talking about how one of the fastest ways that you can connect with people is to ask them to help you with something small, something that they can totally do. And that is one of the fastest ways to connect with people, because people want to be of service. So I absolutely want to be of service, and I want to say yes to everything somebody asks. Like every time I see somebody put something out, it's like, hey, I'm in need of this, or comes to me personally, like, can you help me with this? Or this is what I'm looking to do. My first impulse is that I want to say yes. I have said yes to things that I probably should have said no to because other people could have done it better than I ended up doing it. But I wanted to be that person who could make that thing come true for these people. And honestly, I think I've learned this just from sheer time and demand. Because when you start to get so many inquiries that you don't have the time to fulfill them all, you learn some very quickly, either from the burnout or from the exhaustion or from literally having no space in your calendar, that you can't please everybody, that you can't do everything. And I think that's what first helped me to realize that. And that reframe around, like, I used to think I had to say yes, and now I realize I get to say no. Because I am actually in a place where, like, my financial security doesn't depend on me turning down one inquiry, right? Like, that's pretty incredible that I've gotten myself to that place. And it feels good. And again, I'm not just callously throwing around no's like I'm up on some crazy, throne. That's definitely not the case. But I do realize that I get to be a little bit more powerful about what I give my energy to. And I think another thing that changed this for me is realizing that other people don't actually think that I owe them what they're asking for the way that I feel like they do when they ask me, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like for a long time, if somebody said, like, hey, can you help me with X project? I would be like, oh my gosh, I am the only person that they are depending on for this. Like, I have to make their dreams come true with this. Like, they felt like I owed it to them to be that person because they came to me. And I realized that's simply not true. And how I realized that is I started saying I wasn't available and people were fine with it. They'd be like, okay, cool. Thanks for letting me know. Or they would say, like, cool, is there anybody else you recommend? Or I would send them a different direction and they would be fine. And once I realized that, like, I wasn't this integral piece to this puzzle that they were solving, I was just somebody they were asking, like, it made me feel a lot better. So if that connects with you at all, like, I highly recommend that. Like, take the pressure off of yourself. And if somebody is putting that much pressure on you, like, maybe they're in the wrong. Like, maybe they shouldn't be asking that much of you. Because ultimately, like, you are powerful. Like, I am powerful. Like, we get to decide what we have the time and energy for. And that gets to change, right? Like, I've been doing wedding photography for 10 years. If I decide I want to slow down, or if I decide I want to change directions, I get to decide that. It's like, imagine a little kid who set up a lemonade stand and it's going really well for them. And they go out there every single day from 2 to 3 and they sell lemonade. And then one day they wake up and they're like, I don't want to do that anymore. What's going to happen, right? Like, they won't go out there. There won't be lemonade to buy, and people will figure out something different. And they might be mad at first. They might tell you how much they missed it, but life goes on. And that's true for all of us. Like, I can't help, as I say that, kind of thinking about the places that I've loved in my life that have come to an end. Being a theater student for a lot of my life, that's how it always felt when a show ended, is nobody wants it to end, but it does come to an end. And we get to feel it together. We get to miss it together. We get to hold on to those memories, and then life moves on. So if that helps, you get to say no. Like, you get that permission. You get to say no. That was a big thing for me. Big revelation. Something I'm still making sure is in my energy field so that I have the confidence to set those limits as I need to. Okay. And then the final one here is, this is a big one. I used to think that achieving things meant that the work had to be hard. And now I realize that things feeling really hard is actually a sign for me that I'm not actually in alignment, because you can achieve things, really awesome things, from a place of ease. So, okay, context, right? What I'm not saying is that everything in life has to be easy, right? That's not what I'm saying at all. There's going to be things in life that are hard. Love can be hard. Work can be hard. Family can be hard. Yard work can be hard, right? Like life, you're going to encounter things in life that are hard. But for so long, I thought that exerting myself and being in this place of the struggle meant that I was really doing it, like that I was achieving it. And I found this bleeding into all areas of my life, like, doing the accounting for the business had to be hard, or sitting down to figure out what my content was for the week had to be hard. And relationships, like having the big conversations, was so hard. And in the back of my head, I always knew there had to be an easier way. And I've really come to this place where now I realize now that whenever I am like, oh my God, this is so hard, that it's usually because I'm in a place of limitation or in a place of deep fear. For example, I mentioned earlier in this episode that like Dave's been a little preoccupied with this project that he has going on. Well, he didn't tell me before this project started that that's what he was going to be into and kind of where all his time was going to go. So when he wasn't like around in his normal way, I started feeling a lot of like my abandonment issues, rejection issues starting to come up. And they didn't just present themselves like that, like, hey, you're having an abandonment issue coming up. I just felt it in terms of like, I felt myself start to get really cold. I felt myself when I'd come downstairs, it'd be like a little bit huffy with him, or I'd just feel this natural resistance. And I felt like what was coming up in me is like, I wanted to fight him. And I realized I'm like, in this moment today, this weekend, I realized I'm okay, that's that thing. I'm just afraid. I'm having some of that old stuff come up. And what do I really want here is I want connection. So I let Dave know, like, hey, I really want to connect with you. And I sat with my own fears, and I let myself be aware of it, and I chose to do other things. So instead of fighting him, I worked on my moon tracker. I called up an old friend. I listened to a book on tape. I got work done. I did other things with my time. I did things that filled my cup. I took a really nice bath. I went to bed early. I did some yoga. I did things for me, and I enjoyed them. I let myself bask in them, and I moved from a place where things were starting to feel really hard into a place where things were easier, and I asked for what I needed. And then we had a great date day yesterday, and it was awesome. And we did connect, and it felt great. So that's just an example of like trying to stay in a place of alignment. And this happens to me with projects too, where again, like I used to really think like if I was working my ass off and I was doing this and doing that and running here and getting this done and saying yes to this person and like, so it was so hard, but I was like, but look what I'm doing. Look how successful I am. Look how many people want to work with me. But I was showing up like not as my best self, and I was so burnt out, and I was going to like bed more than exhausted, like not in a good way exhausted, but like in a bad way exhausted. And I was waking up frustrated, and I was taking it out on the relationships that was the closest to me. And I wasn't showing up as my best self for them. Like nothing was successful about that. And when I started to realize, I'm like, these projects that like I'm not as good at, I can have other people do for me. I can have people, like I can hire somebody who can double check my work and make sure that this part of my job is easier, and then I can do what I love better. That's awesome. That's what we need to be going towards, right? Is finding that ease. And even now, like there will be days when I feel like I have to get like projects ABC done, and I feel like no matter the entrance point I'm trying to take to any of them, I cannot move it. And so I set it aside for a little bit and I come back to it. And then all of a sudden, like not only are projects ABC done, but then I also get projects EFG done too. And it all happens at once because it was supposed to happen. Like there's something about not forcing things and just allowing things to happen as they should. And it's a tricky balance, because I do think, like, trust me, there are times when the project that I'm working on feels hard. There's something about it that's just hard. And so it's not going to always feel easy 100% of the time. But there's a difference between beating your head into a wall and sitting down and letting yourself move through it, if that makes sense. And again, life is hard, right? It's part of the reason I know that you're listening to this is because you feel it too, that sometimes the hard stuff comes up. But I also think that if you're listening to this, that you're probably also a person who knows how beautiful life is and how joyful it is and how precious and fleeting and amazing it can be too. And those are the moments that we want to savor and wait for and be a part of and be appreciative of. And I believe we can appreciate the hard stuff too. But I also really do believe that it can be easier than we allow it to be. And that we just have to watch for whether we're in that place of resistance or whether we're in that place of allowing. Maybe those are better words than like easy or hard. But I also think that easy and hard are places that we identify with a little bit more often than the allowing versus the resistance. So anyway, those are the three things. So I hope that any of this connected with a bit from within you. And if you haven't had a chance to check out our website, we've got some really cool offerings up there on abitfromwithin.com. If you're loving this and you want to listen ad-free, or you want to support my work by joining our Patreon page, definitely visit patreon.com/abitfromwithin. So many cool things that get offered through there for free, and you really help make my dreams come true of being able to do this work that I love, connecting with you and encouraging just real time to take care of yourself, that you deserve to be a priority to you. So let's end today's episode with a card drawing. Right now I'm going to use Gabriella Bernstein's Super Attractor deck, and we'll give it a little shuffle and see what little token of affirmation or thought the universe wants to kind of end this episode with. Instead of worrying about the future, I know all is well when I'm aligned in the moment. It's like it never ceases to like just blow my mind when these card drawings like say better something I was trying to say during today's episode, because I totally feel like that kind of sums up so much more beautifully what I was trying to say in that third I used to think. Because it's so true, like when we are worrying about the future, when we're trying to control things, like it's really hard. And when we just know all is well and we let ourselves be present in the moment, things go so much better. So much better. It's just easier. Even the hard stuff is easier. So what a beautiful place to culminate this episode. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll be back next week with another new episode. Until then.